I'm going to go through a lot of information tonight. And one of the things I want to tell you up front is we have links in a list that I just sent Corey. So if at any point you fall behind or you've got questions about something, we can get those to you at a later date. So don't panic like you have to take notes really fast, because I am going to run through this, because I also want us all to be able to, get to bed at some point tonight. But I am going to turn off my camera and I am going to pull up an example here to show you if I did a property history. This is what you would see if I sent you the documents myself. Okay, so this is my example that I have for you guys. Is a Washington County. It's actually one of our properties here on the grounds. A property history can take me anywhere from 2 to 4 hours to complete if it's pretty straightforward. But if we have any issues, this one did have some issues. What we had been told wasn't entirely the full story. There were some different questions. I ended up actually having to pace off the property lines to figure this one out. And I think I still have a few questions, but for now, this is what we've got. Um, so I do have a folder on here that says Primitive Baptist. It's not the church. It's actually one of the houses here on the property, the Cersei house. But this right here is the report that you would receive if I sent you something. Close that out. So you can see here that I do a basic timeline for you up front, the address. So we do work with businesses downtown, and sometimes they own more than one property. So I make sure that the addresses are up here in the top. But you'll see there's a basic timeline. This is the original survey going back to 1839. The first land grant to this property was for William Davis and Quinton. Davis and Quinton sells to the Holcomb family. And then eventually they sell to Archibald Smith. And we think Archibald is actually the person who built the house in 1871. There was some question about this because part of the property was actually sold to somebody else, to Margaret Baggett. So this is the basics. I look at maps, the Sanborn maps, the directories, deeds, different information. Down here will be a legal description. And then if there's any images that I come across online or that I had questions about, I will put them down there with some kind of annotation, just so you know what I did, and if I had any questions. So everything would be pretty straightforward. You would also receive the deeds themselves, digital copies of those. Isn't that lovely handwriting? I have particular clerks that I like now because their handwriting's so neat and tidy. There's also, if I have a question, so since this property, we did have some issues and some questions about it. I usually have a folder that I work with that has the questionable deeds in it. You won't see those unless I feel like it's relevant. This is the original land patent. You can see William Davidson Quinton. John Tyler was president at the time. In the images folder, a lot of this is Google Map images, so that I know that the property that I'm looking at, like if I have a point of reference. It's also whenever we go through our photo collection for historic photographs, in case something like the address doesn't add up just right or something, I always have this point of reference that I can go back to and say, this looks really close, or it has this detail, or the street view looks really close. But you'll also get photo reports. So if we have a photograph that I'm pretty sure relates to either the property or to the people who live there, you'll see that photo report here. Some of our images have been digitized, and I'll show you our catalog in a little bit. But this is going to be kind of this is the photos that we have related to your property. But I'm not going to provide you with those photos. You'll have to talk to Stephanie about that part. And then the maps. So all of those maps that you saw listed on that timeline that I provide, I actually provide you with the maps themselves, so you can see what I'm talking about. So this is the original survey. Come on, there we go. So right in here, you can see that even though technically there weren't supposed to be any white settlers here, somebody has already put in a field. This is a prairie. And then you're going to see water and springs. And if somebody's actually built a structure on the property at this point, then there'll be some notation for that. Sometimes you'll see churches and cemeteries there already. Family maps is another source that I use. We have the books for all 6 counties here in the library. And it's really helpful if I'm trying to look at what is there then, what was there. So this is a modern map, but it'll also show you the historic map, kind of like that survey. And then there's another one that's kind of in between, but it also shows you who had the original land grants. And then this is a Sanborn fire insurance map. If you haven't seen these, the ones I'm going to show you guys to search for tonight are actually in color. But these are really, really helpful, and the keys are available online if you don't know what the symbols mean. So we know that if they have specific symbols, it'll tell you what kind of material the building was made out of, whether it's brick or whether it's siding. It'll tell you how many floors, what kind of structure was there on the property. So over here, we're actually looking at this property right here. This is the Searcy house. You can see it as a 1-story structure. It's has a front porch on the front. It's got wood siding. There's a side porch, and then there's kind of a little awning, and then on the back there's another smaller structure. And this is from 1897. And then over here on the street, you can see there was a stable. So at one point they were actually running a stable off of the property. And then behind is the grist mill and different things. So these are really neat if you're looking at like how your property or your structure has changed over time, or if you're trying to verify that the dates that are listed from the county assessor is correct, because sometimes there will be a structure there and they'll say, oh, that must be the house. It's just been changed. But you might get to looking and go, oh no, this is an entirely different structure altogether. And so this is kind of one of those clues that you're looking for on your property. And then of course I put and then the 1908 plat map. See, it's in color. So Fayetteville, if you work with this, will have a folder for the whole town, but also Springdale doesn't do that. They do 4 separate pages for the downtown. So here's the public square. This is where the museum sits today, in that little green square there. And then that little funny looking Tetris thing is the Searcy house from 1908. And then I provide you information about the individual people who lived on the property. This is usually just the dates that they own the property. This isn't necessarily their life before or after, unless they do something really wild, like join the circus, or they die in a weird way, or I don't know, they do something really stupendous, and then that information will be here. But most of the time, it's going to be things like this. It's just a census report. If they're mentioned in Goodspeeds, I will try and share that page with you so you can see. So this is O.D. Slaughter. He was a representative at the state level. Go back. People. So the Searcy family actually owned the property the longest. and they were there. Sometimes they rented it out. Sometimes I think there were times where they thought about selling the property. We have uh, deeds where it looks like they were going to sell it and then they didn't follow through. Um, but you can see, Cersei and Sons had a general store downtown on Emma. And whatever information I can give, because usually that's what people are looking for. Um, if somebody was a postmaster, we'll put that information in there. Whatever information is available. Baggett's really interesting. Even though his wife is the one who owns the property, Baggett was actually a blacksmith. And a few weeks before I started this property history, we actually did his house. So I think that pretty much covers what I will provide you with to start with up front. This is what you get from the county assessor. So it's usually got a deed on here. It'll give you a legal description. Because this one is a government property or government owned property, it looks a little different, but you can see here the block number, the section, township, and range, and also the lot and block numbers for the property. And then usually around here in this section is where they'll give you information about the age of the property. And that is a guesstimation in most cases based on the kind of research I do, or maybe the latest update to the property. You can ask for the aerial photos of the property and some of the maps, or you can tell it not to do that depending on your preference. So that's a lot of information that I send you. And I know that, but I want you to see what I see so that whenever I send you that timeline, or I tell you this is where, I think the house was built, or this is why I think it was built at this time, you have the same information that I have. I do have a couple of other pieces to show you. Benton County and Boone County and Carroll County and Madison County, Newton County, don't have the same information freely available the way that Washington County does. So you either have to pay for the convenience of having access to the R County data webpage, or you can pay for a chain of title from a abstract company, or you can go into the county courthouses and actually do the research yourself. And what I'm going to show you in Washington County will actually work in the same way in those courthouses. It's just you're working with physical records instead of being able to search online. But in Benton County, we don't have a 1908 plat map. We have a 1903 plat map. So I used my grandparents' address for this one, just because I was a little more familiar with what I was looking at to start with. But you can see the street names sometimes change because these are definitely not the same street names that are there today. You can see when the railroads are there, if they're not there in some of the older ones. This is where McKee roughly is today, if anybody's interested. And this is what their information is going to look like. This is just the basic. And on their page, you just click on each one of these to get the different information. So this is the current owner. This is all public record. Again, section, township, range, block and lot number, and the subdivision. And you can go in and pull the improvements, the sales, the valuation on the property. Up here to Boone County to show you Boone County has a little bit different information. And this is what theirs looks like. Most of these are only publicly available going back to maybe the 1980s or 1990s on the other county web pages. But ours in Washington County we have other ways of getting the information beyond that. So this is where I start, is Google Maps. A lot of the times whenever you call me and ask me for the property, I don't necessarily know where something is. But Google Maps is really great. I do recommend starting at this view and not the satellite view, because as you narrow in or zoom in, you're going to be able to see the individual buildings and the lots, the way they're going to match up more on the maps that you're comparing to. And that's really important, especially if this is the first time you're doing that, so that you're not getting confused. Because all of these extra artifacts, when you've got the trees and everything, sometimes you can't see the actual property the way you need to. I do like my little street view guy. I'm gonna drop my dude. And this gives me kind of a 3D walk around. Sorry, I'm not trying to make anybody motion sick. So here's the museum. And then the property we're looking for is this one here. When you're using Google Maps, some of these older dates are actually really helpful to see what changes have happened, because it does go back a lot of the times to 2007. And I can almost guarantee you there's been a lot of changes on most properties in 20 years. Ours hasn't, because it's on a museum site. But some of these properties will change, but also the foliage changes too. So, all right. I'm checking my notes here to make sure I'm not forgetting anything for you guys. So one of the things that I do when I'm using the Google Maps, and I'm going to show you my horrible scribbles. But this is what sits on my desk when I'm working on this. So the property that I'm looking at, the house that I'm looking at, is right here. I write the lot and block number, and then the street names, and if they've changed. So Emma once was called Holcomb Road. If I had gone all the way up to Huntsville, you can see over here in the margins maybe that it says Huntsville Avenue, but also North and College. So that if I'm looking at something else that somebody has hand drawn or whatever, I know that these things have changed over time. So this is the creek and Mill Street. It doesn't have to be fancy. It doesn't have to be pretty. It's just something to help you with what you're working with. And I use this as scratch paper. You can see I've scribbled things out here. I'll draw lines, keep track of some of my my deeds, and also if I think I found a photo someplace, then I might make a note here. So scratch paper is your best friend when you're doing this kind of stuff, so you can back up and don't be afraid to start over from scratch. So then from here, oops, I go to the county assessor's page. Once I have my address and I kind of know what I'm looking for, because when you search the property, I'm going to show you what will go wrong if you search by address for something that, or for a property that is owned by a nonprofit or a government entity. So this shows all of the properties that Shiloh technically holds. But if I put in the actual address for the property I'm working with, it's Johnson, the Cersei house doesn't pop up. So if I back out of this and go to the search property again, there's usually an option up here to search the map. And you can do this at any of the county assessor pages. So whether it's Boone County, Carroll County, Madison County, Benton County. And you're just gonna work at it a little bit until you find exactly what you're looking for. So I've got Thompson here, I've got Huntsville. And here's Emma. There's the railroad tracks. And you can turn off all of these parcels, the boundaries for each parcel, or you can turn on more. I like to use the township and range and section, especially if it's something I'm not entirely sure where it is, or the legal description doesn't give me that. But here's the museum, and here's the property in question. So you're looking for this detailed report. So again, this is what you saw a while ago. The only thing that's different is I can click on the deed, and this is usually going to have a list of them. This one just has the one, but you want this oldest one because it's going to have the most readable legal description. Instead of having like degrees and minutes and seconds and all of that, it's going to have feet, or it might have chains or rods or whatever, and those are a little more manageable. The when you've got the degrees and seconds and stuff, it gets a little complicated. But you can see 1980, Roy J. Bauman, for $1 and other valuable considerations in hand, paid by the museum. So he gives part of lot 1 and part of lot 8, all in block 7 in the original town of Springdale. This is actually a part next to the house. It's not the full house. Anything else? I don't think so on that page. If you do search by address, let me show you what that looks like. Miss Johnson. The view button is what you're clicking on to get that same report. And then from here, I usually go to our 1908 plat map. So this is how Springdale is done. It's divided up into 4. So you have east, west, and then you also have north and south. So, so this is the northwest portion of Springdale. So that's what I was showing you a while ago. If you want a zoomed out view to kind of see what else is around, or maybe you have a property that's not in town, you might want to work with the township and range up here. So in this case, Springdale part of it sits in Township 18 North, Range 30 West. So these are township, these are specifically for survey. You'll also see things that are called civil townships. Those are more for census purposes or maybe districting for voting. So it can get a little confusing when people start talking about township. But in this case, we're talking about the survey. So here's Springdale. But if you have property outside, you might look for things like a school or a church. So here's school district number 72. Here's Johnson on this one, and they have school district 109. And if somebody had massive like orchards, or if they were using it in some unusual way, you would see that kind of thing noted on the map when you zoom out more than what you're going to see in town. You see Bank of Springdale owned property outside of town. So these civil townships, Prairie, part of Springdale falls into the Prairie. I don't know which one of these. I haven't played with this part so much, but so here's Carter. This is where our Carter's store that's on our property came from. But again, you can see these are the civil townships. So you're looking at Prairie, White River, Richland, Durham. And there's usually going to be a voting center in these, or you'll see the name on the census records for these townships. So if you're ever looking at the people themselves and you want to know where that is, you can go look at one of these kinds of maps. This one does have the 1908 plat map. The 1903 I don't think does, but the 1908 plat map actually has photographs. So if you have an older home, you might go ahead and scroll through these photos at the bottom, because it does have information, or sometimes has photos of those older houses. Most of these houses I think are gone, but there's also people in there, businesses downtown. So here's Tawny Town in this one. You'll have to open those individually. The family history books, I showed you those, but I'll show you the bookmark to their publisher's page. So you can see that these are available for almost any county in Arkansas, and I think through most of the United States. So what I'm showing you doesn't just apply to Springdale or to Washington County. And they're relatively affordable for what they are. And those also help me with the township and range, because most of the original properties, if you have a property in town, a lot of those originally were sold as 40 acres, 80 acres, or 160 acres. And so a quarter section of a township and range section is going to be 40 acres. And so it gets a little messy trying to figure that out with the town, or with the legal descriptions that are provided by the county assessors. So the next part is the Bureau of Land Management. Just mark. Here we go. So that original survey that I found for 1839 was here. You're going to change this to whatever state, whatever county. These are cool because you can do it outside of Arkansas, not just Arkansas. Washington. $30. And then this one, in order to actually see the map itself, you want to go to plat image. And there it is. The surveyor puts notes down here. Sometimes the survey is done, I think in this case it was done in 1834, but they didn't file it until 1839. Yeah, there it says 1834. He was holding off on payment for work he had done. The other part is the land patents themselves. So same thing here. going to narrow it in as much as possible. If you're doing genealogy research and not property research, you can also search by people here and just leave this kind of open. And if you know the section number, you can put in the section number too. And it'll help narrow down. And then you're looking over here for that quarter section of that quarter section. That's why the family history maps or that township and range on the county assessor's page is really helpful. In Springdale and other places in Northwest Arkansas, you'll also see names like this on there. These are Choctaw individuals who were given this land as part of a treaty, but they never actually got to live here. So William Barrington he had part of what is Elm Springs and Tawnytown. And you can see that he's listed as an assignee of these Choctaw individuals here. Sorry, the screen's a little funny today. They're doing some work on this page. So William Barrington, assignee. So this is also a hint, you know, that this was Choctaw land, and it tells you the treaty most of the time right here. The Sanborn maps are available online through Library of Congress. There's other copies at the University of Arkansas. We have copies here. So if you go to the collection item, this lets you search by town. So we're going to do United States, Arkansas. We'll stick with Washington County. And there's Springdale. So for our mission area of Benton, Madison, Newton County, or Benton, Boone, Carroll, Madison, Newton, and Washington, the Sanborn Fire Insurance maps are available for Alpena, Bentonville, Berryville, Decatur, Eureka Springs, Fayetteville, Gentry, Gravette, Green Forest, Harrison, Lead Hill, Lincoln, Prairie Grove, Rogers, Siloam Springs, Springdale, Sulphur Springs, and Winslow. Pettigrew does not have one, but Pettigrew had a plat map drawn by the Frisco Railroad that's available at the county courthouse in the clerk's office. And that's where you might look for some other plat maps. Sometimes there were other plats that were done. I'll show you here in a second. Benton County. Benton County has one for 1903 and 1905 or 1995 online. There were others done at different times, and sometimes they're digitized, sometimes they're not. So this is the 1897 Sanborn map for Springdale. It's a lot of extra clicks. Sorry about that, but that is the only way to get in. So there's Emma Avenue, there's Mill Street. Doesn't exist anymore. So here's Holcomb Street, Main Street. So the second one is the one we're actually looking for. So here's our pond and our spring and our creek, and here's the house. And the museum would sit somewhere right here today. If you wanted to download these, that's down here. It does give you the option of a JPEG or a TIFF if you want something a little larger, but that will hold on a little longer. And then you just click on go and it'll download Um, Springdale has 1897, 1904, 1909, 1914, 1924, and 48 for their years. Fayetteville goes back to the 1880s, I think, on theirs. And some of the other smaller towns may only have one or two. They're not going to have quite as many. But basically, these are going to encompass whatever is inside the city limits at the time. They're recording businesses that they're insuring, they're in town, but they would also include the houses and stuff around. So those boundaries are going to change over time as the city limits change. But also don't get discouraged if you go in and like on 1897, you can't find the property you're looking for. Maybe start with 48 and work your way back, because 48 is going to go a lot farther out. Show you the city limits on it this time. And then these are going to correspond to the pages. So 6, 5, 2, 3. And this is Emma Avenue here. Here's Thompson. The Washington County Archives is why we can do what we do for Washington County properties. So these deed and mortgage records are here. So we know that William Davidson or Davison Quinton sold the property, or he was the one who had the original land grant. You also can find the original land grants here. Here's William. So these, anytime it says United States of America, this is an original land grant. This one's nice and tight. You can see somebody had to file it after the fact in 1934. Probably they were checking their abstract and they were missing a document. No, cancel. There's one that looks more like what he would have filed at the, filed at the county courthouse, not just at the surveyor's office. So if you know who had the property last, then from there, you're going to work your way backwards. So William Davidson Quinton had this. You can also work forward. We know that he was the first one. It does this sometimes, sorry. We're going to change it to grantor. And you're going to see he sold most of it to John Holcomb, James Sutton, and John West. Unfortunately, for some of these older ones, these are going to be missing pages. This is where your gaps come in the record whenever if I send you one, it's because something's missing. In this case, this is the actual deed, and it goes on for pages because Quinton sells or trades basically everything he has here in Springdale to the Holcomb family. And it's still going to be township and range. They haven't subdivided the town yet. And then from there, I would go, if I were working forward from the back, I would do Holcomb. And I want to say J.O. because sometimes Joe Holcomb, his son, is who ends up with the property. They didn't always file all of the documents properly. So here's Joe's estate. Joe Bell is Joe's daughter. In this case, I know Smith. I know that John Holcomb sold to Archibald Smith. And in this case, you're going to see that lots 1 and 8 in block 7. He also owned the parking lot across the street from us that's was the bank parking lot. And it's part of the same deed. And that's going to be passed down over and over and over. But if you don't have Quentin's information, you haven't found the original land grant, you just have that last deed, that earliest deed listed on the county commission or county assessor's page, then that is the document you're going to do, and you're going to make it a grantee, and you're going to work your way back to see until those documents match, or those property descriptions match in the documents. So we knew that the Cersei's owned the property. So I could have done it this way. And seen how he got it. Sorry, it shouldn't do that. So the Slaughters owned it for a little bit, or part of the property for a little bit. I hope that part makes sense. I can tell you that this page crashes occasionally. And what you'll want to do when it does, it'll give you a screen that says there's an error. You're going to want to clear your history and your cache and just start over again. Or you can do it in a private browsing window. We also have directories here. So for Springdale and Fayetteville that are really great. So it'll go street by street and building by building. And then you can figure out kind of what property you're looking at. A lot of our photographs and a lot of our things that come to the museum don't necessarily have an address on them, or they're not labeled with the right address. And also, if they change the addresses, they redistrict things a lot in town. In the 60s and 70s in Springdale, especially the building numbers, the house numbers changed like almost every year. And so one of the things that you want to look for is one of those directories if it's available, because you're going to know where this street intersects with that street, and you can kind of figure out which structures have been there over time, especially if you got the Sanborn maps that you can compare with, or the plat maps, or different other pieces to this. You can start to figure out which one is your house, and not have to rely specifically on that address. But for us, what that means is whenever we get those donations in with those photographs or those documents or those pieces, sometimes they don't even tell us that part. They just say, this is my great Aunt Bessie's house, and she lived over on, Johnson Street, or I think she lived on Johnson Street. And so these are things that kind of help us pinpoint those pieces, is by having those street by street and building by building records to kind of compare that. Oh yeah, no, Bessie did live on this street. This is accurate. So for us, we also have our research files. So some of those documents that I send you about the individual people who own the property, maybe some of the maps that I find, if it's a hand-drawn map. Emma, we have some hand-drawn maps over the years. Those things are going to come from our research files. And so we have our vertical files. So we can go through there and look for the people, or if we know that there was a certain business there, we might look for the business in this list. If there's a church or was a church on your property, we have the church research files. But the database, I think, is the coolest part of what we're doing right now with the digitization. So I'm going to do an advanced search to show you kind of what that looks like. So I'm going to limit this to photographs because you guys want to see the pretty pictures. And a geographic location is going to be Springdale. You can limit this or not limit this as much as you want to. So this is actually the Cersei house here on our grounds. This is from the Washington County Historical Society collection. You can zoom in. So if you're wanting to see, when did the front door change, or, looking for some specific architectural feature, this is a really cool way to do it. This one actually has interior shots as well. If you've been on a tour of that house, that looks familiar. And then if there's any information, other information about it, it'll be here. So this one actually popped up because Annabelle was the donor. It doesn't have anything to do with what we're doing, but you never know what you're going to find in these. Sometimes you'll find somebody you weren't looking for. So this is the creek right alongside. So the house would be actually up here somewhere in the corner, and this is around about where that shed was that I was showing you that was a stable. So one of the other things that I use is Ancestry to pull up information on the people themselves, but also there's directories on there. Sometimes there's yearbooks. If you have a business, a commercial property, you want to look at the yearbooks because sometimes you're going to see ads for your company. Maybe if you're looking for like who owned the business at that point, sometimes that'll be in the yearbooks. There's all kinds of stuff. And they, for Arkansas, for Washington County, they just put a 1906 ownership and land plat map online that's searchable by person. So if you know who had your property, you can kind of see how much they owned around. But if you don't have access to Ancestry, we will eventually have Angie's on here. Am I allowed to tell this part before I go any farther? About the guest computers.
Oh, yes, yes.
Okay. So eventually we will have guest computers here in the library. And so you will be able to come in and do some of this research on your own with me in the room if you need to. And that's the other thing about all of this. I'm happy to do this. I do a lot of this. This is one of our most popular research requests. But also if you wanted to come in and do it on your own and kind of get the satisfaction of digging through the clues and everything like what I get to, this is one way you can do that. And we'll have access to Ancestry. But if you don't have access to Ancestry, you're doing this at home in your pajamas late at night eating ice cream. I can't let you have ice cream here in the library. You can use Family Search. It's free. It has a lot of the same resources that Ancestry has. It's done through the Mormon Church. And you can store all of your stuff here that you're working on. You can start your own project in the family trees where you keep track of some of the information you're pulling. But your search function is pretty much the same. What books are seen? You can see he went to Hawaii. He brought back a plant. They took it to the hospital and shared it with everybody. There's a newspaper article in the research file. You can see Find a Grave is linked here just the same way that it is in Ancestry. Our map. Just a picture of the house. You never know what you'll find on Ancestry or on Find a Grave. I don't know that I've seen that picture before. But there you go. See, Chronicling America is another site. I like I didn't want to bookmark him. I like Chronicling America because sometimes these crazy guys in Springdale got this weird notion that they wanted to move a house from one side of town to the other. And of course, the newspaper had to comment on that. So the Springdale News is digitized and available up to 1927. Did I not bookmark this one earlier? Oh. Doesn't look like it. Okay. America. So again, you're going to go to collection items. This is just a little tip anytime you're on Library of Congress or National Archives. That's what you're looking for. We're going to limit it to Arkansas. It's up here. Washington. And you can leave it just open if you want to, if you want to see if maybe what you're looking for is mentioned in Fayetteville or in Winslow. If you did it for Benton County, you would get Gentry, and then Boone County has Harrison, and Carroll County has Green Forest. Oh my gosh, Green Forest talks about axe murderers almost weekly. So if you're looking for all the axe murderers in the Ozarks, Green Forest has you covered. This is I'm gonna say Cersei here. Maybe we'll get lucky and get an ad. I'm gonna change it to Springdale though. And this is really nice because it highlights what you're looking for, and then gives you a little snippet of what you're reading. So if you're looking for specific information, uh, so in this case, it looks like Fletcher and Cersei had a combined interest in a grocery company. And this was actually on the corner of Mill Street and Emma, kind of where the bank building is today, or was. And it says that, you know, he sold his interest to Mr. Cersei. Sometimes there's really gossipy things in here. The newspapers are great at this point to tell you who's visiting whom, what they're doing, if there's a death in the family outside of the area. If somebody's ill and in the hospital, it'll tell you. I have people who ask me if their house is haunted, and this is a good place to start. Did somebody die in your house? Um, so yeah, here we go. Cersei Brothers. So here's our guy who owns our property at the time. He owns a dry goods, shoes, and furnishing goods. Sometimes it'll tell you where that is. Sometimes it doesn't, depending on what they paid for. Today, I did research on Chronicling America, and they talked about how many pigs got loose and were wandering down Emma Avenue, and you had to go to the newspaper office in order to claim your pig, but you had to describe your pig in enough detail so that they knew that it was your pig. So you just never know what you're going to find on here. Like I said, Green Forest is going to have your axe murderers. One of the things you can do on here is actually change by ethnicity, because Springdale only had a white newspaper at the time. You can't change this. But we can go back up here. So they had an African American newspaper. The Echo out of Eureka Springs has a German version that you can read. Good luck with that. It's old German text. But this is helpful if maybe you know that somebody you're researching is African American. That isn't necessarily going to be reported here, but they will talk about it in St. Louis and Kansas City and other places where there was a larger African American population. And usually they had connections back here to someone, or the people here had connections there. And I think the last one I have on my list to show you for like digging into the people who own the property is Goodspeeds. So Goodspeeds was published in 1889 in Northwest Arkansas and Benton, Washington, Carroll, Madison, Crawford, Franklin, and Sebastian counties. But it also covers other counties because in 1889, some of the other counties either didn't exist the way they do today or didn't exist at all. So just keep that in mind when you're going through these. They did this basically across the entire United States at different times. And like those county history books that we have in our libraries today, it was user submission, or reader submission. So these are going to have family histories that the locals published or sent into Goodspeeds. And Goodspeeds' rule was not to change anything about the story that was submitted, except for maybe grammar or spelling, just for readability purposes and reading comprehension. So whatever lies or truths are in these are all the lies and truths that have been submitted by the people at the time, which is really cool because you might find out how somebody voted, or you find out, that they lived in another town and then came here and then they left again, or they went to Oregon, or they went to the California gold fields, or, if they were injured in the war, what was going on. So you just never know. Civil War is the war. Um, I think that covers, this is kind of what I work with the most to get started on these things. I have a handful of others I show you guys, but I don't want to keep you guys too long. Um, but the Sears catalogs, a lot of those have been digitized. So if you have a kit home and you're trying to figure out when your house was built, there's also Aladdin Homes and some other companies that did these kit homes. They would ship them in on the railroads, and then people would put them together. There's topo maps, historical topo maps are here. And then 1894, there was actually the skeleton map for Washington County right here. So for some of those earlier properties that I'm trying to pinpoint exactly when they were built, I might go to this if I can't find a Sanborn Fire Insurance map. But yeah, this is basically what I start with. There's also Index Arkansas. So we have periodicals here. We have the Arkansas Historical Quarterly, and then for each one of our counties, we have their local historical and genealogical publications that I might go through, and it has been indexed by the University of all of those have been indexed by University of Arkansas. As well as most other Arkansas publications. So the Democrat Gazette, sorry, it's not working right now. But yeah, that is in a nutshell and really quickly and really like so much information and so little time. I'm so sorry. But that is what I do when I do this, and that's kind of what I recommend, just to get a brief overview. So I guess at this time I'll take any questions or comments, or if there's something you want me to show you more in depth, I'll be happy to do that at this point.
Rachel, Oh,
Go
somebody
ahead.
asked about rural properties.
Yeah, I'm looking at that one.
Okay.
Renee, are you still on here? Yeah, she is.
Yeah.
Um, Renee, which one of the sources were you looking at, or were we looking at when you were asking about rural or uh, in town? So most of these sources will look outside.
She says plat maps, Rachel.
Plat maps. Okay, so yeah, the plat maps are going to, the only time that you might only have like in town things are those Sanborn fire insurance maps or the directories. Everything else is pretty comprehensive. So the family maps, the plat maps, and I can show you for Benton County. Let me get it pulled up and I'll share my screen again. So here's the 1903 plat map and the 1995. There's other things on here if you're looking for cemeteries, if you're looking for like, yeah, even voting maps. This is where you go to for Benton County. This file is really, really large. Really large. And so if you're working with Benton County properties, I actually recommend that you just download it and save it someplace that you can access it later. Because it takes a while for it to completely download. But it has biographies and it does have a handful of pictures, just like what the 1908 plat map does. If I remember right, they're mostly people and less structures, but I think somebody's horse makes the pictorial department here in this one. But it's going to look very much the same as the others. And then there's an explanation for the township and range that I've been talking about. So these are really handy. And it's taking a long time to load. That's why it looks funny. It actually is very pretty. Don't look at the weird. So this is the county-wide. And then it narrows in on the individual. There's Springtown. Let's see, it takes a while. So 1995 kind of does the same thing. It looks a little different, but it's just black and white. It's not color. And it looks like somebody has handwritten on there, just like what the 1903. Yes, the recording will also be on our YouTube channel. And then we'll send you out the links. What else? Not right now, to come for research. I think we're supposed to open up the middle of March. And hopefully by then we can totally take appointments. Right now we're limited on our space for our researchers. But no, you guys are more than welcome anytime once we're open again.
And Rachel does have an online calendar that you can book appointments with too.
Yes. I don't know where that's at. I haven't been on there in a while. Just a second.
I will find it.
She'll send you the link. Here it is. It's on the research page. If I can remember how to share my screen. Here we go. So yeah, if you schedule an appointment here, it gives you 2-hour blocks. Since we're closed, it says no availability this month, next month. So, 2005, that might make a difference. Or 2025. There we go. So yeah, just click on one of these boxes and it tells you what availability is there. what you schedule. Anything else? I really do realize that this is a lot of information thrown at you very quickly. But I wanted to take the time to show you a little bit of each one of the tools so that you would feel comfortable playing with them. I think of these as toys a lot of the times more than tools. But I think that's kind of the groundwork for all of what I do with these. If there's specific questions, we also work on those too. Tyson had some specific questions they asked for not too long ago. Other people have had different questions that we've tried to answer. Anything else? If not, then thank you guys so much for hanging out with us this evening.